and elect of the Southern California Public Health Association, the Women's Issues Chair of the Hampton Institute. I sit on this board of the Society of Analysis of African American Public Health Issues. So a lot of this stuff is informed by my work as a practitioner, looking at pop culture from another lens too, as a womanist, working with feminist media, and also just a survey of the literature to come up with this topic. Once again, I just use this image to show that what's old is still new, as far as black women and their bodies and how we are exploited in different ways. And the key to exploitation, what I want to pick out, is that we are allowed to own our sexuality and our bodies in a way, but the key to exploitation is who controls it. When we choose to display ourselves in a way that something that, do we own ourselves here, or is our bodies being used for someone else's exploitation? So ownership is key in understanding exploitation. And I also want to point out that the basis of something sitting in your wallet right now, capitalism, is a black woman's body. And I can point that out here as it begins with our reproductive labor in slavery. Our bodies in that way were used as a product. The products were used within a global slave trade. That slave trade became the basis for the U.S., the European economy, and these different post-national industries today all started once again with the simple exploitation of a black woman's body. And you can see in our ads that once again we're still showing that we are taking care of the world, other people. Everything starts with us as a basis once again. So we are at the same time a commodity and a prop. We can still be using our advertisements showing that the basis of the resistance of capitalism begins with our bodies and what was done with them in that way. So once again, it goes back to the issue of ownership. And another thing besides that is cultural colonization. And that begins with racial and gender oppression. Not only is it something that we look at outside of our communities, within our communities ourselves, we do not have a lot of ownership because we have a system of patriarchy within our own communities. So it comes back to those isms. We have the racism and the sexism oppression. So once again, you will see that the people who help exploit us actually be people who look like us, as far as black women. And once again, there's a hyper-surveillance over our bodies. We had a recent uproar over Rihanna exposing herself in a certain way, and there was a back and forth about was she exploiting herself for money or not, but the same point is she's an artist, so she has ownership of her own body, she knows what she's doing, but Serena's also a public figure. Does she have ownership in what she's doing? It depends on who has the ownership over what you're acting upon here. And this just goes against to a quote I share here is that our body parts pretty much are fragmented. Once again, if you're a commodity, like on a manufacturing belt, they can use different portions of you, moving things in and out of place. So depending on what they want to sell or of us, it could be our butts, our hips, or thighs, breasts, lips, or skin, and our hair are constantly overemphasized, fetishized, approved upon, and we know about that with the whole Derek Braves approving upon our cornrows, or Kim Kardashian approving upon our buttocks. So at the same time, it's approved upon, or it's trend spotted. So it's just a trend for now. Objectified, and once again, it goes back to being exploited in that way. And this is just a representation of what that exploitation looks like. Going back to for much of American history, black women, we existed out of the scope of true womanhood, meaning that we are dehumanized in a way. Our bodies, our minds, once again, it's not looked upon as being, I wouldn't say virtuous, but we don't have we are not given the decency of womanhood in time. So you get to, I don't know if you've seen these images before, I can go through them quickly. The first is the Oprah dress, and that came from a designer, a concept designer named Peggy Nolan, and she was actually selling these things. I forgot how much the dress was. You can order whichever naked Oprah you want, in whatever style, and people were wearing them, and I pulled this out of a fashion magazine. I think it was Vogue or one of them, and once again, commodified. You would think that when we look at Oprah, we think of her as someone who has the highest amount of respect as a black woman. Once again, she's still commodified in this way, and these dresses sell for a good amount of money too. She did have a pretty good amount of sales on them, and saw a television interview with her about it, and she just called it art. So she didn't see anything wrong with the way she used Oprah's body in this exploited way, because once again, black women are not given the decency. We're not applied to be looked to as women in that way. The other one is an ad. The next one here from a old Old Navy commercial, I believe, these two ads here. And once again, the white women could remain covered. The black women bodies are again used to sell a product. So we're still a prop. We're still a commodity in that way. It goes back to Jezebel. And if you know those things, Satisfy and Jezebel, and those stereotypes of how we can be used as to sexualize anything for sale. And this one brought a lot of attention. This was I want to say the Norwegian magazine or something, but this was called the Black Woman's Chair, where she was actually used as a prop. And don't worry, it's not a real woman. They actually created a black model design. So it's a wooden object that is created to look like a black woman in every way. And it shows, once again, the hierarchy of womanhood, where the black woman is just, once again, a prop, sitting literally beneath a white woman for her to use as a chair. So this is the way we are represented and exploited. So this brings the issue of what happens with this type of exploitation. What does that do to us internally? How do we ourselves internalize it? And how do other people treat us because of it? Once again, I'll go back to thinking globally. How do people treat us once we travel outside of the U.S.? How do they see us when they see these representations of us? That impacts the way you are treated when you travel, and that impacts the way people think about us. When we get there, all these representations, and then it is something that we internalize. I'm just pulling out of a 2011 paper that I came across about a study that found that the interpersonal influence that seemed the most powerful on a woman's body image development was boys and men validation, attractiveness, and desirability. So that cut across. Now, it was just found not only the girls that they looked at, but the women still were looking for validation outside of themselves, and our validation was based on how we look and our image. And if your image is constantly distorted, or you're told that your image is never good enough, how does that impact you and your health, mental and physical health, in that way? And this reality is reflected greatly in pop culture, which either mimics or influences what occurs within society. So we start with this need for validation based on distorted images, and there is some pushback, luckily, so I wanted to place this on there if you would ever want to check that out. It's called Pretty Period, and it's testimony about black beauty and healing, and dealing with, kind of counteract these images. And they start at, once again, at a young age, because all the studies are looking from young to elder adults, what these things that our need for validation brings about. The problem is the need for validation still has drastic outcomes in our social and psychological well-being. One of them, once again, I said that we're objectified, or we're looked at parts and pieces, so we think we need to improve upon these pieces, which is your left-hand picture here. And we all know about the butt enhancement trend, the things that are coming about from them. They're greatly coming from when I work in clinical research, I work in the medical field, so seeing these things come through the door at times when you're in the ER hanging out, or I kind of go to look for patients for my own studies, you actually see these problems. You actually see that people are injecting themselves with anything you can think of, trying to create these artificial fillers through their bodies. The next is a Cameroonian singer, called herself the Beyonce from Cameroon, but she has a product out that is selling really well. It's called White and Delicious. So she shows her transition using this product. And sadly, this product is selling really well in Africa, in the Caribbean, and it may hit the shores in the U.S., but there's other things here in the U.S. for you to use anyway on your shelves. But she has great global sales. She's getting a fair amount of interviews selling this product. And that, again, goes back to a distorted image and a need for validation. If the distorted image tells you that the white is on top, that there's something wrong with how you look, then you can only be taken seriously in parts and pieces. And so you seek validation, and these are the drastic outcomes, because we all know that there's many drastic outcomes for skin bleaching. I mean, first of all, at risk for septicemia, you're poisoning your bloodstream, there's cancer, skin cancer, there's so many things at risk, but yet her product is selling really well. And then once again, this need for validation means that we sometimes put up with people who look like us, what we call our brothers in a way, treating us in a certain way, because we are once again identifying with our oppressors in a way. Our sexism, colorism brings us back to the acceptance of misogyny. Why do young black girls still listen to these artists, still buy their product? Once again, it's a distorted image and a need for validation from these people. So even though they make comments like these here, they're still going to get our support. And it comes back to all these different things acting upon black women that allow us to still. Would you like me to read some of your reasons?
Oh, I was going to ask, do you have a copy of that, or where did you get that from so that we can?
Oh, goodness. I came across this. It was one of those things that flashed on your social media page. But I have my contact information, so I can email you any of these images that you see. The first one is the Kevin Hart one, and this caused a lot of controversy. And he always gets himself in trouble now, opening his mouth. I think that people are on him, especially in the field of womanism and black feminists. They're ready and waiting for these people. So I think I probably got it off of one of their blogs. So this one deals with the issue of colorism. And so hands down, light-skinned women usually have better credit than a dark-skinned woman because of broke-ass dark hoes, laughing out loud. Dark-skinned women take a punch in the face better than light-skinned women. So yeah, I like soft yellow B-word. Neil, all the prettiest kids are the light-skinned ones anyway. So that's how he feels about it. Lil Wayne, if you know the lyrics of his song, beautiful black woman, but I bet that the bitch is better off red. So it's another term for light skin. You know, we have all these different words that we come up with. Kanye West, if it wasn't for race mixing, there would be no video girls. Because we know once they get our images distorted, we're approved upon, so black women have been removed from even black videos. So it goes back to there would be no video girls. Me and most of our friends like mutts. So anyone in your family, you know, if we're going to call people mutts, biracial people, that's again is a slander itself. And yeah, in the hood they call them mutts. So once again, he's praising his love of mutts. Young Berg, I'm glad he no longer has a career. I'm kind of racist. I don't like dark butts. You know how someone prefer light-skinned men or dark-skinned men. It's rare that I do anything with dark butts. That's what I call dark-skinned women. I just don't date anything darker than me. So that takes us back to something else that is acting upon black women outside of that, you know, our image, a distorted representation image. Then we have to deal with rape culture. So going around on Twitter, this was last year, I was watching all these tweets go out, was black power is for black men. Because once again, we're talking about now the sexism. There are all these isms that are pushing against us. And this person, I love his, so I pulled it quickly, because black violence never includes sexual violence against women. Because black women, once again, we kind of relate, protect our own oppressors in a way. So we will protect them, and then when we talk about black on black violence, we never bring up the fact that there's domestic abuse and things like that. It's something we don't even think. And then the fact that we have large amounts of statutory rape in our community. Everyone got that one, you know, uncle no one leaves the kids with, but we won't ever deal with that situation. So once again, that's why black power has never really included black women, because we're not yet empowered to even speak out about what happens in our own homes and communities. I will encourage everyone to check out B. Hinton of Filthy Freedom, and this is just her definition of how rape culture actually works. And once again, this is one of those things that are acting upon us. The highly valued concept of loyalty and the ever-present patriarchy pervasive in black communities lend to a strong rape culture cultivated by secrecy and solidarity. Many black women find themselves victims to both men and conscience. When saving yourself means betraying your brother, our black power is for black men. When you must choose between your own safety and your racial allegiance, black power is for black men. When you're forced to silence by other black men and women who refuse to acknowledge the role of misogyny, sexism, and patriarchy in the perpetuation of domestic and sexual abuse, then black power again is only for black men. I will read these because I thought this was kind of small, but another thing acting on us again, exploiting our bodies again, is the sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. And particularly when you look at young black women or young girls. In 2014, the White House reported by the Council of Women and Girls assert that 22% of black women have been raped, but we persist that many rapes are unaccounted for. Further, nearly half of female victims who were raped before the age of 18. Approximately 9 out of 10 African American victims who reached out to the organization, and I'll encourage you to look them up too, the Black Women's Blueprint. And in March, they released a brief called The State of Black Women, Sexual Assault, Sexual Exploitation, a brief summary. 9 out of the 10 women that did actually reach out to them to tell them their stories reported that they never bothered to disclose ever being sexually assaulted to anyone within their families. They didn't tell anyone in their community. They didn't even tell the police or anyone within extended, criminal justice system. So that's what goes back to us being unaccounted. We just don't talk about it. It's just locked shut, put it away. And of course, remember what happens when you internalize those things and keep it to yourself. What is going to happen to your mental state of being? What's going to happen to you in your relationships? And how you have a healthy relationship if you're hiding such things. and keeping it to yourself. According to the FBI report, 60% of sexual assaults are underrepresented each year, and in the black community, the number is even higher. So that's the general population, but we're even above 60%. Because once again, with rape culture, it's a culture where it's victim shaming, it's taboo. No one wants to come forward if you have to go through all these things in the criminal justice system to prove your innocence. And in the black community, it's even 10 times worse, because once again, it's about we're not going to let another black man go to jail. So keep your mouth shut, keep it moving. So according to the U.S. Department of Justice, between 100,000 and 300 children in the U.S. are sex trafficked each year. You guys like Super Bowl? That's the biggest place to find sex trafficking in children. They line them up and take them there, that's where it happens. And you see that has a Super Bowl, and pimps bring these young children there to service all the attendees, so that's where you will see these numbers. 94% of the children who are sex trafficked happen to be female. The victims are more likely to be African American. So your population of all the kids being sex trafficked, 40% of them are black children. What population do we make up in this country? Only 30%. 40% of our kids are being sex trafficked when you look at the population of those kids. More than half of the confirmed sex trafficking suspects, these are the Johns, the pimps that we're going to call them, 2% of them are African American. That goes back to knowing that young black girls and women, being once again the bottom of the social strata, no one's looking for them when they're missing. No one really cares what happens to them. They're your easiest product and commodity to move because they have the least amount of worry or care about them. There's something, it just makes it a lot easier to go into these communities, take these young girls who are unaccounted for, and use them in that way. So that's once again how we're being exploited in that way down to the level of children. So future steps. Practitioners need to have a greater understanding of the historical exploitation of black women's bodies and how these different isms and pressures, the external pressures, impact the health and well-being of black women. Again, with future steps. It's staging interventions looking at the historical connections. So I work in these niche markets. I work in biomedical research, I work with Womanist and Feminists, and then I work with a public health specialist. Everyone's saying the same thing, but they're not talking to each other. Yeah. They're using the same terminology, but they're not talking to each other. I'm like, we're all working to the same goal. Is everyone familiar with the theory of intersectionality? Or should I run through that real quick? So that theory looks at racism, sexism, classism, colonialism, ableism, and heterosexism. But on the flip side, all these things are also looked at by public health specialists. They just call them the social determinants of health. We're operating in silos. When we have our own terminology, it's kind of like I speak Spanish, you speak English, but we're using the same words to say the same things, and we have to find out a common meaning of how can we work together. If you're going to call it intersections, and I call it social determinants, they're the same factors. Because social determinants will break it down. If you're going to look at class, well, social determinants look at income, your access to employment. That goes back to class. Your access to education will go back to class. So if you're going to look at racism, then we're going to talk about zip code. Place matters. Racial segregation. If you give me your zip code as a public health specialist, I can tell you the likelihood of what's your life expectancy. It's tied to your zip code. And in this country, we still have racial segregation. It goes back to racism. So the intersection and social determinants are the same thing. When we talk about ableism, access to health care. When we have people who are disabled, in certain communities, they don't have access to a wheelchair, so they can't come out their door. So we're all saying the same things, but once again, not working in unison to bring about needed change or needed practice and policy. Because if we advocate together, we can actually make some changes. But if you're working here and I'm working there, we don't see our common ground and realizing that we're advocating for the same communities, I think that's the disconnect. So we have to look at our connections and how we can work together in that way. And this is small, so I'll go through it too, is talking about the different factors and the isms over here and what they look like when they actually impact our health. So we look at child exploitation, and I'm once again looking at it from a global perspective. What does that mean? Child exploitation includes child marriage. There's some young black girls in certain countries, we all see what happened with Boko Haram, who are being forced to marry older men. There's still that problem with child exploitation. So that means increase of pregnancy complications, because the younger you are and the earlier you're giving birth, the more likely you're going to have all sorts of pregnancy complications. There's a lot of women's groups, again, not working with public health specialists because they work in silos instead of working together, that they just focus on getting medical care to repair the damage that happens to these young girls. So everyone's working on certain things, once again, apart. Child exploitation also has decreased opportunity for education and social mobility. The younger you are, and having your body controlled by a husband or being a teen mother also impacts your opportunities for social mobility. It's not that you can't, it won't happen. I'm the product of a teen mother, but it takes a while to get there, you know. There's other factors in the isms of sexual exploitation. With all these young black girls, we're looking at our HIV and AIDS rates. If we're making up the basis of your sex trafficking population, of course we're going to have an increased risk of STIs. Of course we're going to have an increased risk of drug use and alcoholism and mental health, because those are used to deal with these issues. Anatomical exploitation, once again, means that we're least likely to go to a doctor or a clinician. Because once again, that previous exploitation, the fact that gynecology was founded by a person who used black women's bodies to perfect his techniques without any anesthesia, all of us makes that a little bit distrustful of the medical profession. So now, because we were exploited then, means that we're not going to get our care now, because we refuse to do it ourselves. Historical stereotypes of black women's sexuality leads to rape culture, sexual and street harassment. Once again, we allow these things to happen to ourselves. Body image factors, mental health, esteem, skin bleaching, and clinical outcomes. Body and respectability politics. Those are once again saying that we don't own our own bodies, leads to problems with our own sexuality and well-being. Because we look at our, you know, you have someone to tell you what your sexuality should be, you never get to formulate that for yourself. Once again, identity politics means that we are our brother's keeper. So we would continue to have domestic or intimate partner violence and keep our mouths quiet about that. And then we have the micro or macroaggressions daily that are also impacting us and exploiting us. That leads to stress, mental health, and chronic disease. My own conclusive statement: the black female body has been the site of constant objectification, exploitation, rape, and commerce. Because once again, what we think we're sitting on was based on our bodies and the value that it gave to everybody else and helped them grow their buffs. In short, black women and girls have been valued for their bodies, what their bodies can produce, provide, create, and even endure. They have been and continue to be dehumanized in such a manner that we must expect and work to find appropriate means to address the resultant physiological and psychological ramifications of this exploitation. And that is my own contact information. So you can email and I can get you. Oh yeah, it's my name. So the C in the Charleswell. Oh, it's missing an E here. Wow. Okay, so C in Charles, like Prince Charles and well pushed together. .apha@gmail.com.
Can you say it again?
Sure. okay, so first C, bless you, second C, HARLESWELL.APHA@gmail.com.